Some of the work that we do supporting families of autistic children. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the models of disability and kind of how society views people with disabilities generally and autistic people specifically. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about some of the advocacy work that we do. But before we do that, I would love to introduce you to my dear friends and colleagues here. And I'm going to ask them a couple of questions kind of about themselves and the communities and the lenses that they bring to this work. So that's how we're going to start off. Just to begin with a little bit more background about the organization, our acronym is the word MAAN, and it comes from the Somali word for mind. And we thought that was really sort of fortuitous when we're talking about the work that we do. We'll get into the fact that some of the communities that we serve really don't have a lot of language for talking about the disabilities, and that can really affect how families view their child's disability and how that lens on disability can really bring a lot to the work that we do. Our organization was founded with the concept that navigating services for an autistic child can be difficult under the very best of circumstances. And then when you bring in differences in language and culture and communication styles, sometimes those obstacles can seem almost insurmountable. All of us are either parents or caregivers or supporters of autistic children ourselves, and so we all bring that lens to the work that we do as well. And then finally, just to talk a little bit about the work that we do is really focused on providing education, providing support, providing empowerment for families to kind of smooth the path to being an important part of advocating for their children. So that's really kind of the work that we do. Just to talk a little bit about our vision and mission here, you can see that we're really focused on smoothing the path for families of autistic children and ensuring that every autistic individual is able to participate in society and be welcomed and be truly included. So that's kind of the focus of our work. Just to talk about what we do, we offer support groups, we offer training, we offer one-to-one services. So if a family would like someone to go with them to an IEP meeting or a doctor's appointment or a meeting with a county or assessment, we provide that service. We also do a lot of social events, so simply bringing our kids together and playing in a safe space where our children can be and exist without judgment from the community is an important part of what we do. And then the last piece that we'll talk about is the advocacy piece. We believe very strongly that while we are working to help families access the system, we also need to be working to change the system that really doesn't serve many of our children very well. So that's the last piece that we'll talk about. So with that framework, let's get into a little bit about the different communities we represent. And Delia, do you want to start us off by talking about the lenses you bring?
Thank you, Maren. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting us. So I'm Delia, and I will let you know a little bit about myself. I am autistic. I found out that I am autistic in 2021. I always knew I was different, but so I went to be tested, and things just made sense. I always thought I was weird. Well, people made me feel weird anyway. I'm not weird, I'm beautiful. I'm autistic, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm also the parent of two beautiful autistic boys. One is 17, lovely, lovely boy, very smart. I should also let you know I'm a mathematician. I teach mathematics at the University of Minnesota and also at Century College. And my 17-year-old is a wizard in mathematics. I would like to say he takes it from me, but he has his own gift. I think he's a lot smarter than I am. My other son, he's 14. He's nonverbal. So he would be somebody I would put on the quite near the lower end of the spectrum. He's 14, but he's at the level of a 2-year-old. So I basically have to do everything for him. So I bring that lens to you to let you know that this is not an easy life. It is very challenging. And I can't begin to tell you the grief that I went through At that time, I was recently divorced, so single with 2 very small children. And it was a hard life. I was broke because it was very expensive to take care of 2 children who have been diagnosed with autism. Expensive therapies. I had to choose between feeding my children and paying bills. Every month I would get bills of, say, $3,000 because they go through so much therapy. Speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and so on. I went through times of having sleepless nights because they wouldn't sleep. And at that time I was doing a PhD in mathematics. So it's like 1 hour sleep, 2 hours sleep, and I was just going out of my mind. So I went through a grief process of confusion, of denial, of anger. I was in the anger stage for years because I couldn't understand why I had 2 children, or 2. If I had to learn something, to me I could have learned from 1. But I have 2. And I went through anger. It was grief. And then I embraced my children. And that is where I accepted the disability. I accepted the beauty in them, the autism in them. And I can honestly tell you, I am at the rejoicing stage. I have added a new stage in the grief process. So I rejoice in their disability. I rejoice in their autism because I learned so much from my children. So that's one of the lenses I bring. Autistic, I am. Mother of 2 autistic boys. I'm also a professor, so I deal with individuals who are autistic every day, and I see how they are treated by my colleagues, I have to say, and also by the system, and also by their own friends. And I also bring the lens of me being a black female. And I guess you can see I'm black, right? Yes. So that is something that we will talk about later.
Thank you, Delia. Fatima, do you want to go next and introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, good morning. My name is Fatima Molas. Thank you very much for inviting us to this beautiful event today. I'm a mother of a 10-year-old son with autism. When my son was diagnosed, there wasn't a lot of support in the Somali community. I'm a Somali mom, so I learned immediately to figure out the system, you know the language, but there were a lot of barriers. I connected with other mothers. There were still doubts and hush, don't talk about the stigma with the disabilities. In the beginning, it really hurt me to even say my son was autistic. I would have one of the ECFE, the school teacher, come to my house, and once a week, I wouldn't even share it with my families because in my gut, it would hurt. The judgment, would they make like a random comment because persons with disabilities are in our community are looked down. So it took a while. I had to cancel a few doctor appointments. I had to call them back to reschedule again for diagnosis, and that took, it's a long, process. It takes about months of being on the wait list. I have learned a lot from support groups, families that went through it. It took a lot. We're here today because this has been a long journey, 8 years of advocating for families of children with disabilities in the multicultural communities. I learned immediately there were so many barriers. I taught myself, I connected with support groups, great women in the network that empowered me, that taught me it's okay to ask for services for your son. It's expensive. Just like my colleague Delia said, it's okay to advocate. So that gave me the motivation to advocate for our community, for the parents that are getting their children diagnosed or still, in denial. And we're here, so thank you so much. Looking forward to a great program.
Thank you, Rufo. Do you want to go next?
Thank you everyone for having us in here. And I always wish to connect with the women organization, women club, women association, whatever operated by women. Because I feel like women are the good listener when I share my story. And again, my name is Rufo, Jiru. I originally came from Ethiopia. I have been here like 30 years. And everywhere in Oromo community. Oromo is the largest ethnic group in Ethiopia. In Oromo, like women treated like second citizen, and men are dominant in everywhere, everything, decision and whatever, just go by men, not women. And I'm very happy to join these beautiful mothers with children with autism. I don't have children with autism, but my sister has a child with autism, and my sister hiding from me. She has a child with autism, and I didn't find out until he reached 10 years old when I visited Ethiopia, and she kept him in an isolated room. And then I was like talking to other kids, then I hear the noise, and when I went to the room, I just found out. And after that, I feel like thinking about other mothers. If my own sister hiding from me, how about the other mothers who are like isolated themselves and they don't share their challenges with the children with autism? And in our culture, in our community, they feel like disability is just physical disability. They accept physical disability, but not like autism. They call the autism children with autism like crazy children, and the community are still looking at them very differently, and that's why mothers are isolated, and they don't go to community, they don't go to different events, they don't go to even family events. I have my own family member in here who have child with autism. After she got that child, then she is not even associated with us. I try to connect with her, I try to be friends with her, close to her, and I ask about her child, and she doesn't want to talk to me even. That's how hard it is. And also when we, like men, like including our husbands, and they feel like it has come from the woman, the mother who got the child with the disability, and the men mostly chose to marry another wife to get another children. Something like that, Maren even noticed about when we go to like home visit, and every time we see it, just mother with the child, not husband at all. He's not part of the meeting or whatever discussion. And so that's why I just try to work with the Oromo mothers and try to them feel comfortable, especially accepting. If they accept, they can connect with even other community, other society. And the hardest part is accepting and coming out, reach out for the support. And right now what I'm doing is just I build very good trust with them, and be very close with them, and talk to them almost every day, and reach out to them when they reach out to me whenever they need support. I support them like my own family, not like somebody who worked for them or something like that. And it takes time, but over the time they feel like accepting, and they try to like connect with the other like Somali parents, like other like American, and it takes longer process, very long process because of the community stigma. And we do training and education and supporting them emotionally and with whatever they need, but what I'm thinking is, to train the whole community. Our society already like out of this box now. They support, but they don't feel like really they have to show. Even when they said we support, oh yeah, we still have to support that family, but they don't do like real. They have to do like through every Friday, like most of us Muslim, Christian, they have to do this now at every religion and institution, and we have to keep do training and keep to increase our engagement with the parent, also increase our advocacy in the community. It's really important, especially American also, they have to understand our culture, and mostly when the parents say no, that no means maybe they don't understand because of language barrier. Also, they are still processing to accept or understand. And that mostly the teachers and the care providers and health providers, they feel like when the parents say no, that means this parent doesn't need support or need Let's just leave it out. But it takes time. It takes, most of the parents, they don't go by title. They go by trust. If they build the trust, they share you the story and they share you what they need. But if somebody's the doctor knew for them, and they don't say, like, they don't trust them because he's a doctor or she's a doctor. And we need a lot of support, especially the Oromo community. We are way behind in education and system and language barrier. The system is so hard on them, and they are confused, very depressed, especially the parents with the children with the autism, the aging people. There's a lot of problem in our community. We need a lot of support. We would love to connect with an organization like you, and we need a lot of support. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Rufo. You brought up so many really important points there, but the one that really sticks with me is that our systems require that parents advocate for their kids. But if the parent themselves is not in a place where they're comfortable with their child's diagnosis, then that formula just doesn't work. We're expecting something, parents to be able to do something that really doesn't feel culturally comfortable to them. So I think that's really worth mentioning. I think we're going to talk a little bit about what disability looks like in each community, and I think you talked about that a little bit. But Delia, can I hand that one over to you about what disability looks like in your community? Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So for me to answer this question, I have to look at it from the perspective of being a Black person. So as a Black individual, now let me just say that I grew up in the Caribbean. That is, I guess you hear my accent, right? I moved here in 2003, so I've been here for 20 years. So I never knew about autism. I never heard of the word before. So therefore, when I was told that I have 2 autistic boys, when I looked up the meaning and I saw disability, I was in denial. I said, my child is not disabled. Why? Because in my Black community, when you have somebody who is disabled, you feel that something is wrong with you. We are blamed. You must have done something wrong in your life. What sin did you commit? I was made to feel that it was a curse. That God has cursed you. So yes, the higher powers have cursed you and your life. You have done something wrong. And so I felt guilty. And so I wanted this thing to be taken from me. Now look at me as a Black individual. Let's go back to that. As a Black individual living in Minnesota, it is not easy. We are the ones who are followed around in stores. We are the ones, I am the one, you know how many times I've gone into a Target store and I've been stopped at the door, ma'am, can we see your bags? Why do you want to see my bags? We just want to make sure that you have exactly what is on the bill. This is my life in Minnesota. When we go to doctors, and we'll talk about that later, it's amazing the judgment that they have of me. And so they would speak to me like I do not know how to take care of my child. It is only when they hear that I have a PhD in mathematics. Then they say, oh, you've got a PhD. Oh, you're smarter than I am. Then they would take out the charts and start speaking to me in language that I don't even understand, the medical language, because I have a PhD. But I always had a PhD, but I'm Black. So I have had quite a lot of discrimination as a Black individual. I hesitate to tell people where I work, the people I work with, that I am autistic. Why? Black female mathematician does not go together. First of all, I'm a female. Do you know when I was pregnant with my children, when I was doing a PhD, I was told to hide my pregnancy? Because females don't usually become mathematicians. So I will be told that you should stay home with your child. And I was actually told that when they actually saw at 9 months that I was pregnant. You need to stay home with your child. You shouldn't be doing mathematics. So black female mathematicians don't go together. Put in autistic. Do you know how I'll be looked at? How I'll be frowned on? My children are the ones who are stared at when we go to stores. Do you know how many times I've been told to leave a store? Oh, your children are too noisy. But when I bring my children into the hustle and bustle of a grocery store or the Mall of America, and they cannot take the crowds, and they do this, they cannot take the bright lights, and they scream. That's sensory overload. They're trying to cope with their environment in the way they know how. When my little 14-year-old starts biting on his shirt, because that is how he's able to deal with the pressure around him, and I've been told, Mom, take your child home, he's hungry. This is what I go through as a mother. This is what disability looks like for me as a black woman and as an autistic parent of 2 autistic children.
Thanks, Delia. Fatima, do you want to go next?
Disability in the Somali community throughout the years. First of all, if you don't have any physical disability, mental illness is just, we don't even believe in that, let alone the word autism. We just recently had an event, MAAN, just like the MAAN. So we're trying to raise awareness for that these individuals with disabilities, they're not any less, they just have a different, their brain is wired different, right? So if a child is in a wheelchair and is a quad or Down syndrome, they can actually see it and they will, feel sorry. Oh, mama, he's got a Down syndrome or he's in a wheelchair and they're trying to help you. But if a child is, mentally disabled or have a different, disorder, neurodivergent, that doesn't, plus the stigma. So even if you have a physical disability, it's always, there is a stigma. So as a mom, when my son was diagnosed, I didn't feel comfortable sharing with my family members. I was kind of in my heart, my stomach hurt so much. What would people say? My neighbor, I still remember, one of my good friend neighbor came, she saw my son, he was running. Of course, he's just hyperactive, pacing back and forth. She said, he's not dumb, he's not drooling. I still remember that. Just imagine going to the park, going to the early education classes, how you're looked at. So the DOM, and then I heard comments from my family members. He was watching a lot of TV. Every time I see him, he's in front of Sesame Street. He loves Sesame Street. My son could read when he was 2. He knows all his numbers. He's a very bright kid. But those comments, as a parent, so you become isolated. You are cut out of the social gathering because you can't go to the prayer places of worship because your son is going to be a nuisance. Just there's no accessibility for individuals with disabilities, which we are working on now with this organization and other organizations. So you miss the holiday prayers. You miss all the big events because that mother is kind of like, we find out playgrounds there's nobody around when I take my kid. So disability is stigmatized in my community. There's a lot of people that are working so hard to destigmatize and bring all our kids to the mosques and bring it out in the community, but you can still see the hesitant ones. There are ones that are professionals, PhD, pharmacists, that will not tell you that their kid has a disability in my community today. So we have a lot of work to do. It took me a while, to sit in front of places like this to talk about my son. I was judged, I was told it was my fault. What did you eat? Did he eat a lot of processed food? Did he watch a lot of TV? Just like the refrigerator mothers back in the day when disability in this country was, discriminated against and segregated, is still where we're at. So that's how disability is looked at in my community.
Yep.
Thank you, Fatima. Rufo, go ahead.
Disability in Oromo community is very similar to the Somali community, and in our community, disability is like very shameful. People see us very, very shameful. The whole family feels shameful if one child born as with disability in the family, and also the community, like when you have that child and go to some gathering, people look at that child, like, everybody look at you. That's why the mothers don't want to take their child to the public. And even myself, when I work with a lot of family, and when I do the intake, the first day they just share me about their child with a disability, and they tell me, don't share with anybody. And I asked them, even can I share somebody who have a child with a similar condition as your child? Said no. And I asked them, can I share with Maren? Then we're gonna help you connect with the resources. They say yes. You see that? They hide it from their own community because they know how they treat them, how they look at them. That's why they are just, they don't wanna be like, somebody from their community to know about their child with a disability, because there was a community stigma. Very, very tough. We are way behind to get out of that views. Very tough, because they look at you very differently. And as I said before, mostly they think the disability comes from mothers and not from the father. I don't know how they view that. This is very challenging. And the mom are the one who always with the child. Father go away for some reason, I don't know. And we need a lot of, the other thing is not like people don't talk much about this disability in the community. They just wanna be quiet and then let it go as it is. They feel like sometimes, like some parents feel like, this is happening, the disability doesn't go away or the child doesn't improve. It happened from the God, and they just want to leave it as it is. And some parents, they take them to the back home, like reading Quran or looking for some traditional healing, something like that. It doesn't even work, and it is very hard on them. Maybe when they go to like medical providers for the service. Some of the parents, they don't speak English, and the interpreter is from the Oromo community. They don't want even that interpreter to hear that story about their child. That's the challenge too, because still the stigma in the community is very huge things in our community, and that's why a lot of Oromo parents still in the isolation. And they don't even connect it to some services, because if they do speak the language, maybe some parents who speak English, they try to connect their children with different resources, but those who don't speak English, because they just want to hide from others, that's why they just limit the service, and they just keep their child with them all day, like having the PCA service only. That the challenge, still a lot of things to work on, how we train the community to accept the disability, and everybody have to support the parent with the children with the disability. Thank you.
Thank you, Rufo. Yeah, I saw again so many really important points about parents not even feeling comfortable disclosing their child's diagnosis, let alone advocating for them, and that's certainly something that we see a lot of. That's not a nice way to face. We're going to talk a little bit about what we think it's important for providers to know in working with families of autistic children in multicultural communities. And we've kind of touched on that a little bit, but I'm going to turn it over to you, Delia.
Okay, thank you, Maren. I think one of the important things is that providers need to know our culture. So I'll give you an example. So my children are African American. They were born here. I'm Caribbean American. One of the things about us in the Caribbean, we are very affectionate. We love hugging. We love kissing. But when I came to Minnesota, I was just so surprised, I have to admit. I was surprised for people, the way people stood so far from each other. Why are you standing so far from each other? You should be closer. So this is something that I had to get used to. So sometimes when we go to the doctors, you would find that my children would go really close to the medical professional, you know, and he would step back. The closer they get, the more he'd step. So I would have to say, that's how they are, you know. They're very affectionate. They got it from me. They're African American, but they got it from me. So I think one of the most important things is to know the culture of the patient that you are dealing with. The other thing is that providers need to be aware of the sensory issues and the overload that our children can experience. Okay, because we are trying, and I say we because I'm autistic, trying to make sense of the environment. So you go into a provider's office and they do this bright light shining in the children's eyes. They are bound to react. And so they may not understand when the children start biting or start hitting, but they cannot deal with the bright lights. My children also cannot deal with waiting, and I have a fantastic pediatrician that I am so grateful for, because she has known my children from the time they were small. So if by any chance she is running late, they will let me know. And they would call me and they'd say, Delia, could you come a little later? Dr. So-and-so is running late. So these are some things that, you know, pediatricians need to be aware of. Autistic children have trouble waiting. And if by chance we have no choice but to wait, give us something to do. Have a sensory room where they can play. They would have balls to play with. They would have fidgets to play with. So these are some of the things. And another important point, the last point I want to make is that providers need to know that parents know their children. I know my children, my child. I have stayed up all night with my child. I know my non-verbal son, he doesn't speak, but I know when he's sick. He can't tell me, but I know. So if I come to you and I tell you I need my child to sit on me to be examined, understand that. So for example, my 14-year-old has some difficulty types of touches. So he cannot have anybody in his mouth. I have a lot of difficulty brushing his teeth. He cannot have people touching his head or his ears. So to calm him down, because you have to take his temperature, right? So to calm him down, he has to sit on me and I have to hold him and embrace him. My pediatrician understands that. But if I go to another doctor who doesn't understand that, it is horrible in there. No, you need to put him on the table. That is where I have to take his temperature. That is why he has to be examined. I said, no, he needs to sit on me. So that is ongoing. So providers need to know that we know our children.
Thank you, Delia. Fatima, I'll pass it on to you. What do you want providers to know about working with families of autistic children in the Somali community?
Thank you, Maren and Delia. First of all, the first thing that's important with, parent is that you build rapport, relationship with that family. You have a trained interpreter that understands the terms if they do not speak the language. Second of all, like my colleague said, having a sensory-friendly environment. All the things you mentioned, Delia, I have experience with my own kid. By the way, I am a healthcare professional by career. So I'm a respiratory therapist. I worked with kids. I do work with kids for the last 15 years. So if I bring that professional and parent lens to my experience what happened to my child. Every time I go to the doctor, my son will scream just with the bright lights. He's a completely sensory overload kid. He's, sensory overwhelmed, like he has to wear headphones. So when I go to the doctor, I immediately learned to advocate for my kid because he was so traumatized. I remember when he was 3, I took him to the dentist. I did not know much about the sensory. He had a hard time brushing his teeth, and all of the sensory, he was dysregulated. They strapped him in the chair. Maren, I still remember that, I'm traumatized. That took a lot out of him. It traumatized my son, and we finally found an amazing dentist whose daughter is a Down syndrome, so she understands the whole sensory process, the environment. It took me a long time for my son to build that tolerance going back to the dentist. I have to brush his teeth and take 20 minutes and build that tolerance and sit with him and sing him songs. So going to the doctors need to be trained. They need to be, understand and have compassion and not rush us. Just like Delia said, the waiting is very tough. Being in the room, bright lights, and rush. You can't rush somebody who has sensory processing. My son will tell me, slow down. Can you imagine? I'm mom, I understand, but he will tell me, slow down. Meaning maybe he's sensing that I'm rushing a little bit, we're going to school or therapy. So, understanding the lights, the noise, and all the hustling and bustling, and all of that sensory overload, and training the staff, and being compassionate, and understanding these children have hard time navigating in this world, and we have to take a step back and give them that extra 5 minutes for them to regulate themselves. Imagine when you're late for work or wake up late, how your day is. I know mine is upside down. So, training the staff, training the interpreters, and working with children as a professional, I see that. So what I do is I advocate for my kid. I learn to advocate in advance. I will tell them, I have a scale at home, so I will tell you his weight. I can do the vitals. I can tell you, and we're not definitely going to check his blood pressures. We're here to get his vaccine boost, check the other things, maybe if he has a fever or needs antibiotics. So unnecessary stuff, I tell the nurse, I will take care of it. He doesn't need to go through, he's already having a hard time. So as a parent, what I deal with my patients, I ask the parent, what do you want me to do for your chronic medically complex child? What is the home routine? I sit down with them and I write it down. And when I hand off to my colleagues, I say, this is what mom wants. Because I want people to treat me just like that. We know the best. We know how to treat our children the best because we're the best doctors, we're the mothers. We take care of that child. So when I go to work, I bring that to my patients and say, do you want me to come back to do this treatment? He's sleeping? Definitely, let him sleep. Sleep is very important, it's healing. So understanding the families and being humble and getting to know your patients is the most important thing in all cultures.
Go ahead, Rufo. I think we'll
Thank you.
work on this question, and then we're going to jump ahead to the advocacy piece because our time is passing quickly here. Go ahead.
Thank you. What the providers have to do is they have to know the culture and the belief. Also, they have to know how to welcome them and a goodbye to them. That's very important. The first 2 minutes and the last 2 minutes to say goodbye. A lot of, also building the trust. And most of the parents, they just focus on the person who is providing the service. They look even at their face, how they welcome them. And I have been doing interpretation and translation for more than 20 years. And I have seen a lot of parents very happy with some providers, not happy with some providers. Especially the parents, the children with disability, they are very, very sensitive. And when they see their providers, and they expected them to comfort them, they expected them to listen to them, instead of directing them what to do on the first day or blah blah, then reading the whole story to them. Also, when I do interpretation, we have to tell them in our language, I tell them this document is not written only for your child, it's written for everyone. Because several times the parent stop me saying, my child is not crazy, why they asking me this kind of question? That's what the provider have to know. The same thing, they have to send the message in advance, telling them, I'm just asking everything what's written in here for everyone. Just answer the one which you know, or that's related to your child only. And that's they know, then they don't get mad. Building the trust is very, very important in our culture, especially in our community. And the more you visit them, the more they welcome you, the more they listen to you, they trust you, and then they tell you everything to get help. Otherwise, if they are not comfortable with their providers, they don't tell everything, and they share everything. Also coming back, most of the parents, they feel like the provider is not good, and they're going around different providers. They are not satisfied because they feel it like the providers just send their service the way it have to be, like professional way. But it's not like friendship, and our expectation is like through the friendship, like not professional. So the provider, the most important thing, the providers have to be very close and very like understanding them and excluding their culture. Even sometimes it's very important to learn how to welcome them in their language. For example, I have a stepmother who is like bipolar, and she used to go to hospital in Shakopee. That provider, they just jump to read whatever, like the test result and whatever, and she doesn't like. My stepmother, she doesn't even write in our language. She doesn't know anything. And one of her friends told her, go to Midway Clinic. They welcome you, your language. And they say bye to your language. Then my stepmother said, I don't want to go to this doctor. She said, then we have to drive her to her appointment from Shakopee to Midway. The Midway provider is from Russia. She speaks our language, she say, Anarufu, means welcome in our language. Then when she leave there, they say goodbye, means Nagandemi. Hagolarginuf, means goodbye until I see you in next appointment in our language. Then she loved it. In the 6 years, she doesn't want to change from that provider. That the same thing, all little things make big difference.
That's so true, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rufo. I think just from my own lens too, I think I'm both a parent of an autistic child, but I also am often in the role of a provider helping families navigate services. And I think the most important lesson I've learned is cultural humility. Like just to go in thinking not only that I'm here to teach something or share information, but what can I learn from this family as well? And as long as I bring that lens, then things will go okay. And I'm so grateful to my colleagues for constantly reminding me of that lesson with kindness and grace, even when I forget sometimes. All right, so we're gonna jump ahead a little bit. I wanna move to the advocacy piece. Oops, I'm going backwards here. My apologies. But we wanted to talk about some of the legislative advocacy that we're involved with. And I think we mentioned that we do quite a bit of work with the legislature. And one of our biggest challenges in an organization is trying to provide services to families and help them better navigate the system while also working to change the system at the same time. And for us, it's really critically important that we're doing both of those things. So we help families navigate the system, we help them with IEPs, we help them with county services, but we always also want to change the laws governing how those systems work so families can navigate them a little bit better. And some of the things that we worked on this year was a bill that would address the practice of withholding recess from kids as a form of punishment in schools.
And I know that kind of comes as a surprise to people, but until July 1st, that is legal in Minnesota, and it's incredibly common. And anybody who knows anything about child development can tell you that recess is critical to kids, and especially kids with disabilities who really need that time to just run around and move their bodies. You know, a lot of our kids are both autistic and have ADHD. And taking away the opportunity to move their bodies is not going to help them behave better, I can guarantee you that. So that's one of the bills that we worked on this year, and I'm proud to say that that one passed. That is going to be law come July 1st. But that came from a story in the community. That was a parent who said, is this legal? Should we be doing this? And then talking to other parents and saying, you know, we should really address this because it's not serving our kids, it's not really serving any kids. One of the other bills that we worked on this year was around accessible and inclusive playgrounds. And this is a story that actually came out of the Somali community. And Fatima, do you want to talk a little bit about what happened and how this bill came about?
Yeah, 2021, there was a little Somali girl playing in a playground in Edina. The playground supposed to be inclusive, accessible playground. She drowned. There was a little retaining pond. So dad was attending to the other children, and these children tend to gravitate to the water. I don't know if you know, 90% of autistic children that die as a result of drowning, near drowning. They just love the water, so they just go. This happens every week or every other week. We heard a kid who's like throughout the nation, like were found in, in the water, either lake or those little, little lakes. So that is what triggered. The little girl was found, and we tried to reach out to the city and the community, the recreational center. This is supposed to be a safe playground for kids with disabilities, yet there was nothing, blocking her from just walking to the water. That's where that started.
And I think that the issue that was identified is that there are a lot of playgrounds that are built as accessible and inclusive, but when they're thinking about disability, they're only thinking about physical disabilities. They're not really considering the needs of kids with intellectual or developmental disabilities. So our effort was really to kind of try and change that conversation so that people are thinking about, is there a fence? Is there signage? Is there something blocking, the way between the playground, and the parking lot or the playground and a holding pond, as was the case. And there too, we worked with 3 different communities to get funding to build inclusive and accessible playgrounds. And as part of the funding contingency, they were required to do focus groups with their community about what the community meant when they said accessible and inclusive. And 3 of those projects are being funded now in Apple Valley, Fridley, and St. Paul. So that was another effort that started with a parent telling their story. Some of the other things that we've talked a little bit about are suspension and expulsion of students from schools, funding for special education, sub-minimum wage, which is the process of paying people with disabilities less than the minimum wage. And that one unfortunately did not pass this year, so that's another one we're going to have to come back to. But those are some of the legislative efforts where we really feel it's important to bring the community voices and to try and smooth that path for families, for people with disabilities, for children to tell their own stories and be heard at the legislature. So we see that as a really critical part of our work as well. And I think we'll end it there maybe and just leave a few minutes for questions.
5 minutes for questions.
5 minutes for questions. But I just want to say on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for this opportunity. And we hope that maybe you will see some parts of our community that maybe are not as apparent. And we just really appreciate the opportunity to tell our stories. So thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Would you tell us more about your organization? Are there really just 4 of you?
Yes.
Well, I shouldn't say there's just 4 of us, but we're, Fatima and Delia were among the founders of the organization, and then Rufo and I joined a year later. But this is really the core team. And then there are, I don't know, maybe like 30 families that are pretty regular participants in most of our activities. And so it's not just us that are doing this work. Our whole mission and vision is really about empowering other families to come to the table and share their stories. So some families are receiving services, other families have gone from being recipients to advocates to leading their own support groups. So we really try to meet families where they are, but we welcome everyone and we try to smooth a path for them to participate in whatever way feels comfortable. Yeah, go ahead.
What, if anything, are you doing to let schools and school districts know about your existence? I work with special needs kids, particularly those on the autism spectrum, and I think it would be lovely to hear you speak at opening week at our school district, because this is such good information for us to know, to be able to provide the services.
And we are always open to doing that.
Yeah.
We have given quite a few talks at schools, Columbia Heights School District, 916. We have spoken to autism specialists. We have spoken to Hamline University, occupational therapists there. So that is something that we do often. So if you have a need for us to do that, let us know and we would be right there. We would be willing to do that because we want to make our voices heard. Because some educators just do not know the life that we lead and how to deal with our children. So that's what we are here for.
Thank you. Yeah, we see that as a big part of our work too. Family facing and provider facing. So, yeah. Go ahead.
So you could talk more about how the males of some of the communities, either disassociate, leave, don't want to be a part. So you talked a little bit about trying to start some work to help change those perceptions, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what's happening, what you're trying to do.
Mothers always take the heavy load of the work automatically. If your kid has special needs, that comes, that's kind of like you taking that. We are 24-hour caretakers. But what we are trying to do in the Somali community, one of my friends started Zoom fathers, support groups. He is in Seattle, Washington. He's been doing it internationally, so he's trying to make these fathers, it's okay, guys are always have a hard time with their kid not being dependent. It's very tough for fathers in general to see, their child needing extra help. They are hoping by the time he's 10, he's gonna be just fine, or he's gonna work in a mechanic shop with me, or that's kind of the mindset for our fathers. So this dad, he's amazing. He's got a 20-year-old autistic kid. He's trying to let this man know it's okay if your child has special needs. This is where you hang out. This is where you let your head down and talk about your frustration and talk about what's working, what's not working, and accept. They're still in denial. I have a mother in our support group whose husband, her daughter is 21 or 22, and the husband still, because of experience and translation, an interpreter who told him when she was young, she doesn't have autism, this is just a system. He's still in denial. This is like 20 plus years. So we're trying to change that mindset and make these fathers include and have them take the kids to therapies and have them fill out the long paperwork every year that asks you the deficits of your child so that they slowly learn. But it's a learning curve. It's a work that needs to be done, but we're working on that.
Thank you.
And I think another part of that is just really lifting up dad voices too when we get the chance. I mean, there's some fathers who are rock star advocates and really out there, sharing their story. And anytime we can provide a platform for them or, give them the microphone too, we really try to do that to make sure that others get to hear their story. Any other questions? We have time for one more, maybe? Yeah. Go ahead.
Why did the sub-minimum wage for disability workers not pass?
How much time do we have? Boy, I'm going to try to tread lightly here because it's a very contentious issue. There are some parents of children with disabilities who advocated very strongly that, or feel very strongly that if sub-minimum wage doesn't exist, then there will be no place for their kids to go. So that's a big fear. And I mean, we've seen this happen in many other states, some of whom have made a very smooth transition to eliminating sub-minimum wage, and some where it was court mandated and it was just overnight. A lot of programs had to shut down because they hadn't really given a lot of thought to what should come in its place. The bill that was before the legislature this year was a plan to eliminate sub-minimum wage that would take place over several years. So it was providing grant funding to organizations, it was a lot of planning, it was a lot of support through state agencies. And we do have a number of these sub-minimum wage agencies that have already said, no, we're not gonna do this anymore. We think it's a civil rights issue and we're not gonna pay people with disabilities less, and have made that transition successfully. But it was, I think fear, basically, what's going to happen if this comes to an end. That's why it didn't pass.
All right, I have twin sons, and one of them worked for LifeWorks that took that path that you just described. And when that happened, my son did lose his job. So I really have a lot of not good things to say about well-meaning people who are trying to fix something. Part of it that needs fixing, and part of it does not. My sons are 52. I've been dealing with this for a long time.
Yeah. Fair enough. I think you illustrated our point beautifully. So that is the difference of opinion on this, and I'm sure that this issue will come back. So stay tuned.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.